Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's Daily Global Show. This is episode number 202 in 202 days. But this is not just another episode because it's a very special episode, our monthly Indiaspora Community Conversation. And we're so thrilled to collaborate with our friends at Indiaspora and with our friend M.R. Rangaswamy. As you can see on screen, we have a very important conversation, connections, community, and content, advancing South Asian women's leadership. We are going to meet some fabulous leaders who are going to talk about various aspects of community leadership, content, connections, and more. Hi, everyone. I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a digital, social, and virtual events consulting company. So glad to have you all with us. We are thrilled to have this conversation. As you can see in our first 200 episodes, we've had more than 1 million viewers, 148 million social impressions, 357 guests, 208 of them women, and we're going to up that ratio just tonight, as you can tell. We're so grateful to our partners at Scroll Global and Scroll.in. Also, you can find our archives on youtube.com/Sreenet, and to our producers, Rose Horowitz at Rose Horowitz 31 and Vandana Menon, Vandana_Menon. They have been live with me for 202 days. All right, let's bring our partner in crime on here, M.R. Rangaswamy. Hi, MR. How are you, sir? Great to see you.
Hey, great, man. Good to see you again. I love this East Coast, West Coast tradition that we have with you once a month. So there's a great partnership.
It really is. And tell everyone about Indiaspora and what it is.
Great. Quickly, Indiaspora is a network of influential leaders. You'll be meeting some of them today. And we work on 3 major areas. One is political engagement. The second one is around community issues. And the third one centers around philanthropy. So we then provide a platform for our members to really disseminate great information and content. And the program that we're doing with Sree once a month is a true partnership where we bring in key Indiaspora members to be part of this amazing conversation. So Sree, I think this is episode 3 for us of 202. So great to be here. And I hope grows to be larger.
Great. All right. So let's bring, tell us who you have with us today. So why don't you start by telling us who you have with us today, and then we'll bring everybody on. But first, we'll bring the 3 folks who are going to start us off.
Absolutely. First is my dear friend, Mythili Sankaran. Mythili is an Indiaspora ambassador member, and she's been very active with our community. And so she is one of the founders of Neythri that you'll be meeting many of them later on in the show. So first up is Mythili Sankaran, and following her would be Chitra Nayak. Chitra has 25 years of experience across companies spanning technology, financial services, and management consulting. And so most recently, she was at a very small company, I think, called Salesforce that I think a lot of you would have heard of. And then finally is Sruthi Ramaswami is a technology a growth equity investor at ICONIQ Capital. And prior to that, she was at Goldman Sachs. And Mythili is no stranger. She was at USIBC, which was a big trade organization. And prior to that, she was actually a techie at IBM and Bell Labs. So let's have our 3 esteemed panelists join us. Hi, guys.
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Sree. Hi, MR. Thank you so much for having us.
All of you. This is a high-powered women's panel. We love it. And we're happy to increase the ratio of women to men in Sree's show. So we will only do better, and we dare Sree to do better than us. But anyway, great to have you guys. And first of all, this is my question, Mythili. I've known you for a long time. You're a big organizer at USIBC, doing the US-India stuff. And prior to that, you were a founder of a company. Before that, you were at Bell Labs. So let me ask you this. Why would someone with a comfortable position such as yours want to do something creative and new and exciting this stage in your life?
Thank you, first of all, MR and Sree, for having us today. An absolute pleasure. And we hope just today we will help move the needle on that ratio that you mentioned. Um, as far as your question, MR, yes, we've known each other for a long time, it seems, even dating back to AIF days. That's when I first met you, when you were running software.com. And when I reflect back on my own life and my diverse professional leadership experiences, I realized I really came from a position of privilege to a large extent. I got to pursue my dreams. I came here as a graduate student in the late 80s and 89, spent much of my early career after grad school working at, as you mentioned, some of the most prestigious labs, research labs, IBM TJ Watson at Yorktown Heights, and then Bell Labs, focusing on what we now call deep tech, right, which was device physics research. But then as Bell Labs shut down and I moved away from core research and moved more into the development side of R&D, a chance customer presentation actually got me excited about what I call as my true calling, which is product management. I really enjoyed being in front of customers. I enjoyed finding out what made products tick, how one created products and services that addressed a distinct need. But fast forward from that, made a number of distinct pivots, one which included running a large global nonprofit like the AIF, which is really where I first got my hands at building community and understood the power of community and what a fantastic volunteer community, when fully empowered, can actually do and achieve large-scale impact. I also ran USIBC, as you know, which was, again, a startup opportunity for me, which was building the brand and the membership and new business models to tackle on the West Coast. But over the last 4 years or so, I've largely led what I would call a portfolio life, right? Which is done a number of different things for various reasons. I took a step back from full-time work. I started to advise early-stage women-led startups. I'm an active angel investor now. I primarily invest in gender-balanced teams. I serve on a private company board as well as a nonprofit board. But I'm also very, very active in several women's mentorship and leadership programs and networks. And across all of these experiences, I started to observe the lack of South Asian women role models in all of these fields. And this seemed, somewhat contradictory to what I've seen in my own network of South Asian women who were all highly accomplished, who were breaking barriers, in whatever they were doing. But obviously, only a handful of these women were making headlines, clearly. So I felt, increasingly this need to scale this impact and create a platform that brought together South Asian professional women. There wasn't any. I did do a lot of research to find out if there were any. There weren't any. The idea was, how can we share our expertise, our resources to lift and support each other's professional aspirations and amplify our work? And through my own first-hand experiences in these networks that I mentioned that were not South Asian, I saw how women were, advancing professionally just by taking advantage of their strong support group, right, which was primarily female. And generally women, and South Asian women in particular, are not good at networking. It's generally considered a taboo word because good Indian women don't put themselves out, don't speak up. Right, that culturally, at least, that's how many of us have been trained, so these subliminal messages as well. So as I was thinking about it, I reached out to a number of folks, and in fact, one fine October day, I was in San Francisco for a conference, and I reached out to my friend Chitra Nayak and said, let's do lunch. And it was over lunch that we talked about this. I knew that Chitra had already launched a successful women's network at Salesforce. So we just started to talk about this. And that same evening, I met Shruti. It just happened. It was a pure coincidence. Shruti is someone I've known, since the day she was born, actually. And she was already running a content platform called the Shakti Collaborative. So I knew she had interest in this area. So we started talking. And, a few video calls later, Neythri was born. We really felt that there was a good product market fit here. And, we decided to go ahead and launch. And now fast forward, we launched Neythri March of 2020, just as COVID was making its mark. But we have persevered since then. Today, we are close to 900 members strong all over the US and outside globally. COVID, of course, got us to quickly pivot and go virtual first. So today we are now a global community of South Asian professional women. And I will let, have Chitra and Shruti, talk about Neythri from their perspective. And we'll also talk about some of the programs that's the content part of our title. And we'll talk a little bit about the programs that we've been rolling out.
Great, thanks. And Chitra, why on earth would you, at Salesforce, you were playing such a senior role and stuff, agree to even do something like this?
So, honestly, women in the workplace has always been an area of passion for me. When I was at Salesforce, about 4 years into my 8 years there, I had so many women coming up to me asking how you make yourself heard in this very aggressive, assertive, young tech environment. And so about 10 years ago today, I co-founded the Salesforce Women's Network. I'm pleased to say that it is hugely impactful today. For those of you who might know, Mark Benioff has become a leader in equal pay for women. So it's made enormous strides. I also teach a class at Cal State University on women in leadership. And I had often wondered whether there was a need, as Mythili said, that was similar but different for South Asian women. And so what we did when Mythili and I talked about it was invite small groups of women to our houses to hear what they thought. Because the last thing we wanted to do was to actually create something that existed already. However, we couldn't find a women's group, a professional women's group for South Asian women. So we decided that we would jump off the deep end and start this. Because as you talk to women that are South Asian, you hear that some of the challenges are very similar to what other women have, and some are different. For example, the question, how do you manage to sound assertive when you are sometimes viewed as coming from a culture which is really just not in your face? And so people that are around you may have expectations which would come in the way. Another question we had coming up, not just from immigrants, but from second generation Indians in their 20s and 30s, was how do you make yourself heard in the quest for investment in your startup when there's so few women who are funded, and even more so few women of color? A last example was, people who would look at me and say, how do you think about managing work and home together when your parents or in-laws live with you? And they talk about the need for a common context and a community. We heard words like sisterhood, belonging, connection. These are all the things that people are looking for out of this South Asian network. So those are all the reasons that I would say we find that this has been such a satisfying experience thus far. We've reached out to and touched so many women, and that's kind of the what's in it for me. I'm going to let Shruti maybe share.
Yeah, so I know Shruti represents our next generation. So the question for her is, how did you end up joining, the previous generation, right? You may want to have started your own network, for example. So what made you join Neythri and be part of the founding team?
Yeah, I think one of the superpowers of our team, not just between the three of us, but our whole team, is how cross-generational we are. And I'll get into why that matters. So I think for me, one of the first things I noticed when I started my first job, which I've now realized is a common feeling among a number of my South Asian women friends, is the lack of role models who are South Asian women who are in our direct career paths. I found myself looking at every news article that mentioned a South Asian woman succeeding in her career path. And even if she wasn't in finance, working in venture capital like I am now, I just felt this really strong connection to her and wanted to know everything about her. How did she get to where she is? She must have gone through a lot of similar experiences I have. And it's funny because I think growing up in this country, living sort of a split identity of being American and also being Indian, I didn't realize how much my South Asian background mattered to me in terms of what I sought out for representation until it started happening, until I started feeling that connection. And so I think one of the biggest opportunities we have here is to elevate more South Asian women role models. I think the second interesting piece of all of this for this next generation of South Asian women is navigating the complexity of our identities. I have friends who are going down career paths that are non-traditional, that are unfamiliar to their families, and navigating what that means and the pressures of that relative to how they become assertive and a leader at work, like Chitra mentioned. I know others who are navigating the pressure to perform, which is obviously very common among our South Asian culture, and trying to navigate that with their own personal ambitions, which might sound more American than South Asian to them and their families and the context that they grew up in. And so I think that complexity of identities is something that a lot of myself and my generation grapple with, that I feel at home with in terms of discussing with our Neythri community. And I think the third thing is really this idea of bridging that cross-generational gap. I was very fortunate to grow up with a very tight network of family friends, many aunties and uncles who are very successful in their careers and everything they've done. Yet for some reason, I always viewed them as aunties and uncles in that context. I never saw many of them as potential mentors. I never felt like I could have that honest adult to adult conversation that I think sometimes is hard to have when you're, viewed in the context of parent and child. And it's something that really struck out in our initial events that we hosted that Chitra mentioned. Everyone was mentioning this cross-generational group is so unique. I've never been in a room where I'm able to interact with young professionals who are South Asian women and actually learn from them just like they're learning from us. It's always in the context of family parties and talking about our kids, but why are we not sort of sharing resources between generations and inspiring each other? So it's for those reasons that I think we have a really unique, exciting opportunity here and why I'm excited to be building Neythri with Mythili and Chitra.
Fantastic. Just a follow-up question. Give us a feel for what Neythri stands for, what you hope to accomplish in general. What is a plan or vision for the organization? So,
sure, I
Mythili?
can start and each of us can chime in. So Neythri in Sanskrit means female leader. Chitra, Shruti and I spent a lot of time actually reviewing a ton of names and how it sounded. We tested it with a large number of folks in terms of pronunciations, and Neythri really resonated across the board, both in meaning as well as in many other ways. So that's what it means. I will pass it on to Chitra to take it from here to talk a little bit about our programs, and then perhaps Shruti can end with our larger vision.
Yeah, you will hear from the other folks coming up shortly, but we have 4 pillars. One is professional and leadership development. The second one is mentorship. The third is social impact and community. And the fourth is what we call founders and funders around entrepreneurs and investors. So those are really the 4 pillars of Neythri from an outward-facing perspective. And we have something like 90 volunteers who help with those, as well as other elements such as the marketing team. We have a very powerful group of marketers. We have data scientists. We have, finance folks. And so that is the broader sort of profile that we have at Neythri.
Awesome. And Chitra, I think what you shared highlights an important part of our vision, which is to be a platform where all South Asian women, regardless of career path or geography, can come together and connect and uplift each other from, a professional standpoint. And so, we want to work with women all across the whole age group spectrum. And we're really proud to share that our membership is already global today. We've been virtual first, just given the constraints of the pandemic. And I think that's even accelerated our ability to connect with women across international borders. And so that's sort of where we're headed, which is, started in the Bay Area, quickly expanding outside of it, and hoping to be cross-generational and cross-industry.
Fantastic.
And just to add to that, MR, a lot of our work is rolled out through events, of course. So across the board, across the 4 pillars, we also supplement that with a number of networking events, because the connections part of building this community is really, really important, as we said, the networking aspect. So we do host networking events as well. And much of our work is also informed through data. We regularly survey our membership, understand what they want, and then tweak and iterate our programs based on that.
Oh, that's great. By the way, a lot of good comments coming. I don't know if you're looking at the bottom of your screen, but there have been lots of people from all over the country saying, go Neythri. It's great you guys started. Sharda Chervu says, phenomenal vision for Neythri. So again, you're making some new friends. Charles says, impressive guests, enjoying the show. So Shree's community is getting to know us, and our community is getting to know Sree as well. Pradnya says, I think that South Asian women have the biggest challenge being heard in the workplace by men in general, but primarily among South Asian men. So I think this hits home to all of us for sure. So I think keep those comments coming and questions coming, and that we can post to our panel. But I think now we're going to bid goodbye to Chitra. She has to leave us. Chitra, great to see you. And, it's great to know that you created this network at Mark's company. Mark and I used to be colleagues at Oracle, so known him for a long time. It's great to see what a leader he's become for women and gender issues. So great job there at Salesforce. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me.
And now we're going to have a couple of other women leaders join us. First one's going to be Gita Murali. Geetha is a dear friend as well. I think I've known her for, I'm not going to say how long, but it's probably between 10 and 20 years. But Geetha has done a phenomenal job at an organization that I support called Room to Read, and quickly grew within the organization to become the CEO of this phenomenal nonprofit. And then we also have Sanya Gurnani. She's the co-founder and CEO of Radius Agent and is a young woman leader in our community. So we want to welcome Geetha and Sanya to join us as well. Yeah. Hi, Geetha.
Hi, pleasure to be here.
Hi, Sanya. Good to meet you. But great to have you, Geetha. It's I don't know, how long have we known each other? I think it's between 10 and 20 years. So.
Yeah, something around that, probably right around 15, yeah.
Yeah. So I know Room to Read is a phenomenal organization. And I know Sanya, I'm sorry to date myself. I know your dad very well. So I'm one of those uncles that probably Shruti was mentioning earlier. But great to have you on the show. And I think what we want to get down here in this segment is to really understand from all of you, yeah, Neythri is this great organization for South Asian women, but what is it you actually do? What are the programs? How do other women join the organization? What would they benefit from it? Maybe we can talk about the 4 pillars of Neythri and what those actually translate into in terms of programs and outreach and connections.
Great, thanks, Amar. I guess I'll get started and just maybe start a little bit about my journey to this moment and why Neythri specifically resonated with me at the moment that it did. In terms of background, I was born in New York City. I moved to Tamil Nadu when I was pretty young in my primary school years, just because my parents wanted to take care of my grandmother, and ultimately returned back to the United States and found myself at 22, graduated with a master's degree in statistics and working for Big Pharma. I had a great job, stable career, family was happy, but I just had never considered career options that weren't based on math and statistics. And so there was this point where I just asked myself, is this the type of work I want to do for the next 40 years? Are there other options? And I ended up enrolling in classes at Berkeley, exploring new topics and interests, and ultimately earning additional graduate degrees in South Asian politics. And from there, a world of opportunities emerged. I tried my hand at academia, technology startups, because of course we're in the Silicon Valley and one has to do that at some point. And ultimately just found that my calling was making a direct connection between my practice and my purpose. And I knew I had choices because the women in my family fought for theirs. They fought against practices like child marriage. They pushed boundaries on what a woman coming from a family like mine could be. My mother was a rebel. She left home early so she wouldn't be forced to marry. She joined the Indian Army, married in her 30s, had me at 38. So I was raised with this incredible urgency around education and the clear message that yes, education was knowledge, but more importantly for a woman, it was independence and power. And I don't mean power in sort of a egoistic sense, but power over my own body and my own mind. And that realization led me to Room to Read. It's an organization focused on creating a world free from illiteracy and gender inequality through education. And we work with our staff 1,600 around the world, 87% working directly in schools, and have reached 18.8 million children through our programs to date, and have our eyes set on reaching 40 million children by 2025. So, you know, this is sort of my day-to-day, and I've been at Room to Read for 11 years. In 2018, took over as the first non-founder CEO, and have had incredible opportunities to work with some of the most influential women leaders of this generation, most recently hosting Michelle Obama and her delegation to our programs in Vietnam. So that brings me to, well, why Neythri? You know, I've had this opportunity to network with so many amazing women. Why chair the social impact committee for this organization? For me, it came down to this fact. I believe that every person has the ability to positively impact their local and global communities. My life is an example of that. One decision by my mom to leave home early and not get married resulted in me running an organization that's now reached 18.8 million children. So I do believe that every person has the ability to impact their communities in whatever way makes sense to them. And there are so many successful South Asian women at Neythri who are looking to establish their own social impact portfolios. In fact, social impact is one of the top interests of the membership. So given my experience in the space, I see it as a privilege to help members develop and now fulfill our charter, which is to help Neythri women develop as community leaders who can create and sustain positive change. We do this through strengthening nonprofit leadership, through celebrating social entrepreneurship, and creating a culture of service and philanthropy. And in just our first year, we've curated social awareness and impact campaigns and investments that are focused on reducing gender inequality as well as other types of socioeconomic inequity across pillars of health, livelihoods, and education. And we have and will continue to encourage South Asian women's civic participation, providing associated analyses of critical issues. For example, we hosted events to discuss racial inequity and allyship to the Black Lives Matter movement. We hosted an event about the importance of the South Asian vote during the upcoming US elections. We want our members to be informed and to actively address the systemic inequalities that are of major concern to our membership. And ultimately, we want South Asian women to have greater influence over removing barriers that exist in access to good healthcare, employment opportunities, and quality education. So that's why I joined Neythri. I am thrilled to be working with this incredible group of women, and I am looking forward to our collective impact.
Oh, that's terrific. Before we move on to the next speaker, lots of great comments coming from the audience. Anita Ratnam from Chennai says, great to see so many South Asian women on the show. Anurima Bhargava says hello to Chitra. Nitya says, thanks for covering the organization and topic. So lots of Richa Gopal says, so great to learn about Neythri. Anika Iyer, hey, is this your daughter here? Mythili has got all kinds of applause emojis. Good to see your daughter getting involved.
Yes, that's wonderful. I didn't know she was on.
Yeah. So lots of great comments coming on. So we heard about social impact. What are the other three pillars? Can we touch upon some of those?
Right. So I'm going to talk more about the mentorship pillar, and then we also have a young professionals committee that I'm co-chairing that I can go a little bit deeper into. Before I do that, just would like to give some context on me and how I got involved in Neythri, and then in these specific initiatives. So for me, I grew up in India, and I had a checklist growing up. I think I was 5 when my dad said I have to go to business school at Harvard at in my 20s. So I I followed the path. I graduated from Carnegie Mellon. I went and worked in investment banking. I went and worked in consulting, went to business school, got married. And I think for me, like what was beyond that checklist was what I needed to figure out after I graduated. And, I've had this urge that I wanted to start something of my own. And around the time that I graduated was when I decided to jump into doing that. There are a few things I knew. I knew that I liked solving complicated problems and I liked rallying people. I liked rallying teams. I identified a problem in the real estate industry of high commissions that consumers pay. And my co-founder, who's a friend from college, had been in the real estate industry running a traditional brokerage. So we decided to jump in and launch Radius Agent 5 years ago. It's a platform, a community that enables real estate agents to be independent. And, this process over the last 5 years of raising money, hiring teams, running a cross-country team. We have a team in India. We have a team in San Francisco and Denver. It's extremely messy and it's extremely hard. And there's a lot of highs and lows that come with being an entrepreneur. And add to that the cultural context of being South Asian and, being in a family construct that has expectations and just like figuring out, when to start a family. Like there's so much that you want to talk about and you want to, bounce ideas off of. And, despite having an incredible ecosystem in my family, my in-laws, I kept feeling this need of like, who's my role model? Like, who do I want to be like? And, you kept looking for this similarity, somebody, and, similar to Shruti, I would like literally obsess over every South Asian woman leader. So around the time, Chitra had reached out about Neythri, and I was so excited to get involved. So the two initiatives that I ended up getting involved in were mentorship and young professionals. What we've done with the mentorship initiative is two-part. So we are connecting women one-on-one, cross-generationally, asking them, what they want to connect on, what are some of their desires, and what they want to do as they grow in their careers, and connecting them to the right like-minded women that can help them on that journey. We're also doing small group mentorship sessions, which is obviously lower commitment there. Like you don't need to meet with someone regularly, but it's a place where you can go get your inspiration once a month and learn from a leader. And both initiatives have been very, very well received. Mentorship is something that came out as something all our users were very eager for, and so we've been able to create that ecosystem. With the young professionals network, what's happened is that there are some unique challenges to when you're in your early 20s to mid 30s, which is about your new job, the first job switch, the first kid. And these are all these like very specific things that we are now doing programming on. We have a session coming up, for example, on fertility, talking about when to start a family, thinking about, what is it that you need to manage when you take that decision. We have a session coming up where people that graduated between the classes of 2015 and 2020 will get paired with folks who graduated between 2000 and 2015. So the idea is like have somebody who's not super senior, who's not from a previous generation, but has actually been through some of these challenges very recently. So this is just like a preview of two of our big initiatives and what we're trying to drive home with this strong community that needs to be built.
Great, and mentorship is something that is so key to anybody. So I'm glad to see you doing these programs around mentorship, but excited to hear about a couple of the other things you might be doing with your members.
Yeah,
Yes.
Sanya's entrepreneurial journey is actually a great segue to our next focus area, which is around founders and funders. I'll touch on the founders piece first. We recognize that building a company is extremely hard, and we are super excited to be creating a community of South Asian women entrepreneurs like Sanya and others who are in their founding journeys now, as well as creating a safe space for South Asian women who may have an entrepreneurial idea, but may not have actually taken the next step to pursuing it, or maybe unclear about whether she wants to leave her job and pursue it. And so how do we increase the pipeline and the pool of South Asian women who consider entrepreneurship an accessible path? The other piece that we're really focused on is around creating a safe, welcoming opportunity for South Asian women who are founders to get access to funders, investors, and advisors who they may not have otherwise had access to before. It's interesting. I think there's a lot of, networks that we may have access to that sound, easy and intuitive for us, but may not be accessible for a South Asian woman who's starting a company. And this is actually one of the core areas where I find that there's a difference often between the experience of South Asian male entrepreneurs and South Asian women entrepreneurs. And obviously there are amazing examples of success in the South Asian entrepreneurial ecosystem broadly. But how do we really make sure that our South Asian women entrepreneurs have access and exposure to people that can really move the needle for them? And the third thing that we're really focused on is elevating the voices of South Asian women entrepreneurs who have been there and built successful companies, connecting them to the next generation of emerging entrepreneurs, helping them share the stories and be vulnerable about what worked well, what didn't, what would you do differently next time. And so we've been hosting a series of AMAs with South Asian women founders and investors to create, spaces for safe, open, and inspiring dialogue. And I'll let Mythili share more about our mission on the funder side.
Yeah, thank you, Shruti. So a lot of what Shruti said, that what we're doing on the founder side, we are trying to mirror on the funder side as well. For me, from my own experiences as an angel investor, this was an area that was very, very close to my heart. I really wanted to create a platform that brings together South Asian women funders, especially women who are looking at being investors for the very first time. If we look at our membership today, a large part of it, I think close to 65% of our membership are in senior operators in the corporate sector. And so what we want to do, these are all women who are leaders in their field. They have spent a major part of their careers building products, services, companies, organizations to scale. And what we want to do is harness that intellectual capital as well as their capital as well, right? Their expertise, and invest in innovative companies that we want to see in this world, both for returns as well as for impact. So from that perspective, we're super excited. This is a very new initiative for us. We have just recently announced the launch of the Neythri Futures Fund, which is sort of the first, a historic first, we would like to call it, because we don't know of one before this. This is a $3 million fund that will comprise primarily of South Asian female investors from the Neythri community. And the idea here is to position South Asian women front, center, and visible as investors and as key stakeholders in the fund. So we're super excited. We would welcome anyone that wants to learn more to reach out to us. We'll be happy to share what we're doing in this fund.
Our question for you, are men allowed to invest in this fund?
Yes, but I was going to crack a joke, but I shall refrain. But absolutely, we certainly want allies to participate. MR.
Okay. Oh, this is terrific. Sree, what a great group of women leaders we have here.
Well, I'm getting a lot of credit for having all of these great leaders here, but the credit really goes to Indiaspora and the leaders themselves, giving of their time on a Tuesday night to a Monday night to be with all of us and sharing all this great information. We're so grateful to you. And as you can see from the comments, it's just really fantastic to see them. Pradnya is asking, are you going to invest? Are you offering to invest, MR?
I'm taking a look.
Yes.
And Vinita.
Sree, we don't want to leave you out, Sree.
Yeah.
I'm a journalist. I have no money, so this is I'm my own startup with no cash. So I'll need to come to you for investment ideas. Let's just go through some of these great comments and questions. Rick says, "What are your recommendations for men about allyship for women?" So let's start with Mythili, and then we'll go to Geetha, and I think there's a good opportunity to talk about this.
Yes, great question, Rick. Thank you for asking. We absolutely welcome allyship. We want your support. Everything we do, we don't live in a silo. We don't operate in silos. So we absolutely welcome allyship. And I think it comes in terms of promoting the work we do, the work women do in general, in your workplaces, right? Encourage them in their professional aspirations. That's what allyship is about. Amplify their work in whatever way you can, in whatever format, whatever platforms you can. Those are all some simple, low-hanging fruit. And, if you can mentor from where you are, along with men, I mean, we're not saying do all of this just for women, but I think the barriers, as you know, for many women are much higher. And our goal is to try and break those barriers and shatter those so-called ceilings.
Great. Let's go to Geetha. By the way, what a fantastic panel. We're all right now on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. And please share this with your friends and family right now. You can tag them. They can watch right after this is over. The video will play again on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. So please do that right now. That would be awesome. And let's go to Geetha.
I also wanted to remind, we do have Renu that we need to.
No, we're just finishing up this segment. Don't worry. She's one of our Indiaspora members as well. I know this is a time couple of people have to leave. So I think Sanya and Shruti, we want to really thank you for representing the next generation of South Asian women. As a father of 2 daughters, I mean, I fully support the work you guys are doing and really can change the dynamics as we move forward as well. So, Sanya,
Thank you both.
Thank you so much for having.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And we're now going to bring in one of our other Indiaspora members, Renu Agrawal. Renu has been a senior executive at Wells Fargo Bank and spent a lot of her time and career in large organizations. And now she's also become part of Neythri. So we want to bring her on board and really talk about some of the other issues that are on the table. So could we have Renu join us? Hi, Renu.
You're muted, Renu.
Yeah, you're on mute.
Renu, you're muted.
Hi, MR. Sorry about that. It's so good to see you. So let me start by talking a little bit about my leadership journey and how I got here. I grew up in India in a very conservative family. My mom was married when she was only 14. My cousins, my aunts, all had arranged marriages, and no one worked outside the home or even dreamed of having a career. So when I got accepted to IIT, which is like a difficult school to get into, my dad was concerned about allowing me to attend, because his concern was that if I became a professional, it would be hard for him to find me a husband. But my mom supported me, even against the wishes of her own mother, my grandmother. My family in general was not supportive of me pursuing an engineering degree. And I went to IIT, where I was one of 5 women in a class of 400. I then went on to get a PhD at MIT, where I thought 15% women was just terrific, even though it was a matter of concern for MIT. This early experience of going against convention and making my own path has really shaped my leadership journey. I not only had to work doubly hard to prove myself in the engineering arena, but also, and this is something that I really noted, it was without the camaraderie and support that I saw my male classmates and colleagues enjoy. It made me focused, it made me tough, and it made me creative, because I was determined to succeed. I have enjoyed a diversity of careers. As I mentioned, I started out as an engineer and then a scientist, and then a McKinsey consultant for several years, and then several P&L and COO roles in smaller venture-backed and private companies, as well as Wells Fargo, a large company. I left Wells Fargo after 13 fantastic years. And now I am privileged to be following a portfolio approach to life. So, you see flashing across the screen, I'm an aspiring grape grower. I've been back in school studying viticulture. I've gotten engaged in the South Asian art program at Berkeley, and just to name a few things. And also deeply engaged in Neythri. I got involved with Neythri because of Chitra and Nayak, both of whom I've known for a number of years. it was a no-brainer when Chitra asked me if I wanted in, that I jumped. Two things really energized me about joining Neythri. One was to be able to build deep, tight networks of senior Indian women that were intimate. And then the second was to help them in creating an organization that would provide support and nurture all South Asian professional women, regardless of, we've talked about it, regardless of geography, regardless of tenure or where you are in your career, and regardless of profession. So that was kind of my journey that led me to Neythri. Then once I was there, what I was really keen on was this concept of a salon that the four of us created. And the salon is an invite-only group of about 8 to 10 senior South Asian women leaders that would engage in intimate, thought-provoking conversation to build deep connections. So we started this, Mythili, Chitra, Malini, and I, and there was, of course, a lot of interest. And so instead of one group, we started with 3 groups, and instead of 8 to 10 women, we had 10 to 12 women in each of those salons. The energy, the enthusiasm, and the engagement of everyone who was in those first series of salons was quite palpable. Very quickly, in the first series of salons that we had, we learned that universally, the women were looking for dialogue that was deeper. It was not, and they weren't looking for another networking group. They wanted to be able to go to places where they would be comfortable being vulnerable, truly exposing themselves, and not having, to put on a show or not really be genuine. And so, some of the comments that we got when we asked, like, what do you want and what do you not want? And I will talk about what they said they didn't want, which in some ways is even more revealing than what they wanted. We don't want time pass. We don't want a networking group or a deal network, a superficial or a surface level connection or conversation, a professional only or a career focused conversation. What we do want is to be able to share all aspects of our personal and professional journey that are uniquely South Asian, a sisterhood to empower and support each other, to be able to build partnerships, and to be in a place where there is no judgment. So after we went through that first series of salons, we said, okay, let's step back and think about how do we make this happen. So many of you may have heard of YPO, which is the Young Presidents Organization, and they have a concept of forums. And we got one of their moderators to come and train us so that we could then moderate our salons to make them much more intimate and much more connected. And so the second round of salons that we had were even better than the first. The feedback was tremendous. The idea is that we talk about our careers, our family, and our personal, and that this small group of women is going to become each of our personal board of directors. And so while we are a part of Neythri, which is a bigger organization, it's 900 total, and then there are about 100 volunteers, and there's a group of senior women. This concept really then personalizes it, because you have this group of 8 to 10 women that you really intimately get to know. And where we want to take this is we have 3 right now, and we are piloting for about 6 months, is to be able to expand this concept because clearly there is a need for this. And the women that we have are all super accomplished, super talented, so much to share.
Oh, that's terrific. That's a great overview. Let me ask you a question, because being a Indian male, there's a lot of stereotypes, Indian American male, right? he's a doctor, or he's a great IT guy, or he owns a motel, whatever be it, right? There's a very positive stereotype about Indian American men. So all of you being Indian American women, what are both the positive and negative things that you guys have faced in your journeys? Maybe Geetha, you can start.
Yeah, I mean, I think that being, from my particular journey, growing up across both the United States and India, I benefited a lot from multiple perspectives that did help make me adaptable and make me able to sort of code shift, if you will, and code switch in different situations. The benefits, of course, are that you gain additional philosophical perspectives, cultural perspectives that help you empathize with other points of view. And I think for my journey, being exposed to so many diverse backgrounds as I was growing up, moving so much back and forth between the United States and India, helped me see the huge diversity that exists in the world and how large the world is, but also just how small it is in terms of our shared humanity. And that's allowed me in my current role to be able to build partnerships and alliances with not just men, but other races, other genders, just thinking about the world beyond binaries. And, Shree's question earlier, just to kind of tie back to that as well, if someone was to ask me, how do men help? How do they play a part in all of this? I think it's, my one ask is always don't look at working with women, educating yourself about women's issues, empathizing with women. Don't look at it as a charitable endeavor. Look at it as an essential part of social progress. And, women like me have benefited from incredible male advocates and mentors. If I think about even taking this role as CEO, my board chair was a man at the time, and the decision they made to choose a South Asian woman as CEO because I had roots in one of our largest countries of operations, it was a shift in the leadership of the organization to have a woman of color representing us as we go into the next phase. So there are definitely challenges. Being a South Asian woman, you're definitely seen with a certain lens and certain stereotypes. But it is up to us, not just professionally, but at home, raise your boys with that same attitude as well. Educate them, help them empathize. There's only so far we can go with women's networks alone. We have to be operating in the larger world, and having male allies that support us, that partner with us, and have that empathy go both ways is really the future in terms of success for all of us.
Oh, that's terrific. Renu, coming back to you for a second, you said you were 5 girls in your IIT class. And I think Chitra Nayak said you beat her. She only had 3 people in her class. Okay. 3 women in her class at IIT. So you must have had a pretty tiny hostel at IIT with all these men and stuff. So how did you navigate the world when you came here to the US, being so technical and so forth, to kind of go in this male-dominated world that you were in?
I would say that was the only world I knew. So in IIT, there was one small girls' hostel, and there were 5 large men's hostel. And the men would sometimes get a kick if I was in the library. They would, take out the air out of my bike. So I would come out at midnight, and then I would have to walk my bike back to the hostel. And, it just makes you tough. So I came here to MIT, and I would say the biggest challenge that I faced was not so much the male-female thing as the cultural. In India, it's such a social society. I had never eaten a meal by myself before I came to this country, where I ate for the first time alone. And so I would say that I've really welcomed over my lifetime having more and more women around me. But for 5 years, I also worked at a construction firm. And I was the only woman on the executive committee. Everyone else was a guy, and they did not think it was, I could put on a hard hat and my safety equipment and walk onto a construction site. And it was just the way, I rolled.
Oh, that's fantastic. Mythili, any comments you want to make?
Well, you'd asked about stereotypes, what worked, benefits, what didn't work, etc. Right? For me personally, the breaking of stereotypes that worked actually started at home with 3 incredible male allies. My father, who always encouraged me. I was the first in my extended family friends circle who sort of shattered the stereotype and came to this country as a grad student with, as a single woman, as a 20-year-old, all on my own, without even knowing where I was headed to once I landed in Texas. But my father supported me. And of course, my mother was a huge advocate. And then my husband, I was very, very fortunate to have met a man who has supported every aspiration of mine, has encouraged me to take risks. In fact, I wouldn't be doing Neythri when I was thinking and pondering about Neythri. I had a fantastic offer to go join a COO of a well-funded startup, and he encouraged me to sort of, think out of the box. And he said, "You can always go do that. Here's an opportunity to create impact, to do something very, very different that you are uniquely positioned to do. So why would you go do something that you can go do anytime?" So I really credit the men in my life. My father-in-law the same way. I've actually also embraced our South Asian stereotype. My parents and my in-laws lived with me throughout and helped raise my 2 girls, because my husband and I traveled all the time. We've, in fact, when we one day exchanged my 5-month-old daughter at the airport, we decided we can't live this life. We needed to go back to our roots and really, have our family here with us. And fast forward 24 years, my daughter is 24 years old, and we have both parents who have lived with us all these 24 years. So there's lots of amazing aspects of, our so-called stereotypical South Asian identity that I think are so unique and so invaluable as well. But when we break the shackles like the men in my life have done, it really helps us soar.
Fantastic. No, this is so impressive. So Priya Rajan says, "Thank you, Mythili and MR, for the efforts, including building the strong cross-border community." So again, Priya is another great leader, and I'm sure
she's a Neythri as well. She's a Neythri too.
Exactly. So,
and we have several Indiaspora members. Vinita Balani is a Neythri and is very involved in Indiaspora as well.
So this is good for Indiaspora too, because I'll tell you why. We have an objective to have 50-50 gender diversity. We're at 66-33, right? So if we bring all the Neythri people over, we'll go the other way. It would be great.
Indeed.
I'm just going to read some of the comments. This is such a great conversation. Please. Sharda Charu, another amazing Indian American leader, says, "Is getting more South Asian women board ready onto public and private corporate boards an objective as well to build a circle of influence? South Asian women are very underrepresented on large corporate boards, despite being highly qualified, educated, and skilled."
Absolutely. Chitra and I, in fact, are working in the background even as we speak now on a board journey program within Neythri. So it is in the works.
Great. Awesome. Sharda also says, "Sponsorship is so critical for success. Have we done research on South Asians sponsoring other South Asians compared to other ethnicities, helping them succeed?"
Well, we are still a very nascent organization and have a long way, honestly, to go as far as research is concerned. I'd love to invite Sharda to come forth and help us get that kick started.
Yeah, that's great. So many wonderful comments. Sujata says, I joined Neythri a month ago, but I haven't had the chance to join in an event yet. This is a fabulous introduction. So that's great to see as well. So we have a couple of minutes left. I'd like to ask each of you to give us some final thoughts and also remind us, Mythili, how people can join, who's allowed to join, how they can join, where they can find more information. But let's start with Renu, then go to Geetha, and then end with Mythili. Okay. So Renu, first to you. Some final thoughts, please.
I would say I highly suggest and recommend, people get to know Neythri better. It's been such a fantastic journey that I've had the last 9 months, because I've always had a lot of strong professional people in my life, and I've had a lot of strong Indian women, but the two have not often intersected, and it's fantastic to have them both intersect and be able to work with professional women who also look like me and have a shared background.
Great. Thank you very much, Renu, and we wish you the very best. Emma, any words for Renu?
No, I think, again, she's part of Indiaspora. She's part of Neythri. It's great to see this collaboration. Last month, we had Women in the Cloud. We had all these Indian American women doing different things with cloud computing, investing, running companies, as well as running networks. So it's great to see the South Asian and Indian community of women take different tacks at the same problem, if you will.
Excellent. So let's go to Geetha.
Yeah, I would just, as Renu said, invite those of you who are interested in participating to participate in the work that I've been doing with Neythri. I've been thrilled to see the number of South Asian women who want to have a social impact, who are already having a social impact, but perhaps want to have a collective impact in some way, or want to learn more about how they can help their local and global communities. And we've really taken a unique approach to helping women determine their social impact portfolios and how they think about the type of impact they want to have in the world and how they show up. And so just invite as many of you as want to participate to join us. It's a fantastic journey, and we've all just grown so much together so far.
Awesome, thank you. And let's go to Mythili. And thank you very much, Geetha, for joining us, and congrats on all the awesome work you're doing too.
Thank you, it's a pleasure.
All right, let's go to Mythili.
Yeah, I want to start off first, once again, thanking Sree and MR for giving us this hour of opportunity to get our story out. This is fantastic. As a nonprofit, we're always looking at ways, free ways, as we would say, to get our voice out. And so thank you so much. Truly grateful for this opportunity. We welcome, all South Asian women across industries, across tenure, as Renu mentioned. We are a cross-generational, cross-functional platform. We would love for South Asian women out there to join us. It's really easy. Just go to neythri.org. If you can see on the top right, you see the Join Now button. We have a simple form where we get to know you a little bit, and you're then part of the member database. You get invited to events, you get invited to mentoring sessions, and you get to avail all of the rich programming that we're putting together. So join us.
Terrific.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. And here's a nice comment from Vanita saying she loves Mythili, and also a link to neythri.org. And by the way, I want to say that a wonderful woman who helped me understand the importance of making sure we're all allies. My mother is watching in Kerala in India. Hi, and she says, great discussion, Monu. Thank you, and great to see you. And thank you for encouraging and teaching us the value of making sure we are.
What's her name, Sree? What is her name? What's your mother's?
Lekha Sreenivasan.
Oh, hi, Lekha. Thank you for watching.
Thank you.
And I think I know who Monu is.
and Monu means son in Malayalam. Yes, so Lekha says, congratulations to all the great South Asian ladies doing wonderful work. What a great comment. And with that, Emma, we're slowly losing you in the light, so we'll give you a chance to give us a final
I know. I chose my office with no lights, and as the sun is setting here, it's getting darker. So I'll make sure next time, Sree, next month, we have another incredible show coming up. But what a series of great programs you're helping us do as well. So I want to thank Mythili, Geetha, and Renu and all the other women who joined us. And Sree, thank you once again for collaborating with us.
Thank you. Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very much.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you, everybody. Yeah, thank you, everybody. Please check out Indiaspora. We had a nice comment here from Nithya saying that she needs to check out Indiaspora. There's a new organization.
Yay.
Though, of course, Indiaspora has been around for a little longer than Neythri, but it's just
Yes,
awesome.
indeed.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, everyone, and we'll see you soon. I'm right back here every single night at 9 p.m. Eastern, and then once a month, we're with our friends at Indiaspora. So thank you very much. Please email me, Sree@Sree.net, if you have any feedback, if you have any suggestions for other events, other topics, other guests. Thank you, everybody. Goodbye.